Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Morning, Carl. Morning, Yasmin.
Morning.
Morning. So, coming to you from incredibly beautiful Surrey this morning. The sun's shining through. It's absolutely amazing. So, really looking forward to get into some interesting conversation this morning. So I thought we'd start with this story that's been fairly prominent across the press, which is, well, the headline I'm looking at from the Standard is London teacher sacked after joking about whacking pupils if they fail the test. A London primary school
Dave,
teacher...
I tell you what, just before we start, can I just take a word from our sponsors?
Oh, of course, Carl.
And then we'll get into the alleged whacking comment story. So this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Education and publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
Okay, cool. So, the story we wanted to start with is this whacking, scandal or controversy with the story being the London teacher was sacked after joking about whacking pupils, again, in inverted commas, if they failed a test. A London primary school teacher has claimed they were dismissed after a pupil misunderstood a joke about whacking them, is the headline I've got in front of me. Do you want to add any more sort of context for our viewers on that, Carl?
No, I mean, I would say to start with that this is a report in the media based on a case that was heard about an incident that happened in the school. And I'm always, to start with, quite wary of not knowing the full details and the full content of what is alleged to have happened in this particular case. And I don't know about you guys, but I do get a more than a faint whiff of this is a good culture war story. You get these stories in papers where people, teacher reported as being, or head teacher reported as having draconian rules for this or for that or for the other. But when you actually did find out what happened, or you talk to the school, you find that things aren't quite the way that it was presented in the in the news story. So I'm a little bit wary of knowing in this particular case what really happened. I don't know about you folks.
What do you think, Yasmin?
I mean, I agree. Whenever I see a teacher story in the media, I am always a bit I'm not sure if the tribunal has actually been published. I don't know if anyone's actually checked.
I've got it in front of me. So this is the final judgment.
It was thrown out, wasn't it?
Her what do you call it? Attempt. Yeah, no, the punishment stage, she was removed. The judge said it was fair, so it rejected the teacher's claim of unfair dismissal. So she was dismissed.
I see. Yeah, but I mean, even that, because I've had a tribunal before, and I feel like if there's anything I know very well about them, or what everyone said in the run up to it, is that they almost always go in the favor of the school anyway. So I don't know. I feel like I'm very skeptical of the media, but I also don't feel like tribunals are always necessarily a fair reflection of what's happened to a teacher.
Yeah, I'll quickly read. It's worth, because it's not that long. The judge said in his closing comments, "I do not consider whether or not the comment was intended as a joke to be particularly important. It was plainly an inappropriate thing to say. The accompanying hand gesture." So I'm imagining when she said she was going to whack them, she was like, "I'm going to whack you." I'm making my hand gesture here. Compounded matters, particularly where at least some of the children did not have English as a first language. A teacher may get away with a comment in these circumstances if all the children receive it as a light-hearted comment and laugh along. It is common ground that this is not what happened here. The risk of making such a joke is that even if only one child is upset by it, it must amount to a significant safeguarding issue. So, I have some concerns with that. That's the actual official report, where it's, well, I mean, I guess it depends what you guys think. The idea that it's like context. If you know your class, you can make jokes. But if you don't know your class, be careful of the jokes you make, because it could amount to, if a student thinks that you're seriously going to whack them, then it is significant safeguarding issue. I mean, it's a really difficult one. What are your thoughts, Carl?
My thought is that this is probably framed in a way as a press report would, to create a certain reaction amongst an audience. Yeah. And that actually there may be a whole bunch of things here that we're really not aware of. Because on the face of it, and I've been in many tribunals where of all sorts, on the face of it, the way it's reported and the particular elements that the story chooses to use as examples, people would say, "What? That's ridiculous." The teacher's made a light-hearted comment, and suddenly, the authorities are, and this is, we're modelly-coddling kids, and we are obviously not, teaching kids to be resilient, and and then also framing it so there are those people who say, "No, comments like that are disgraceful. You can't ever say anything of that sort. That will never," and you get a polarized debate, don't you, pretty quickly. And I'm quite wary of that, because it seems to me, from the little fragments of information that were given through the media, something was said which in most cases, I would say in 99% of cases, if that was all was said and there was nothing else going on, then it is very unlikely that a school would take such a dramatic action as to dismiss somebody on the grounds of one comment that may have been or may not have been misinterpreted by one individual pupil. But I have a feeling that I don't know the whole story, and therefore, in actual fact, it's not quite like that. I don't know what you think, Yasmin.
I think what I didn't like about it in particular, especially in the media articles, was I felt like this EAL pupil was almost scapegoated. Like, I just found that really odd to mention, because this child didn't understand English, then or they didn't speak English as a first language, then it also meant they didn't really get the humor. Like, I just feel like there's also more to that. And, I did think a lot about, well, how does that child feel? Is that a child that's easily identified? I think it was the school was in East London. So, yes. I mean, it's unlikely that's probably the only EAL child. However, I just found it odd, because it's now been picked up by like a really particular part of, X, where it's just kind of doing the rounds as like, we used to be a proper country. So like, if you can't get our humor, get out. And I just feel like I'm just, really kind of confused as to I'm just very suspicious of the media interest in that particular tribunal. But also, like, I do sometimes feel like one thing that I did also think about, I can't lie, I am a bit of a cynic in teaching. Like, I love schools, I love teaching, I love teachers. However, I am a bit of a cynic, and I was thinking, this teacher's a lot older. I think, because I think it said she'd been in teaching for 35 years. Yep. So like, I was also thinking about how sometimes older teachers just have a harder time at school, if they're in like a classroom role, and they haven't got a particular TLR, or they've chosen not to have one, or sometimes they can be made to feel like they're really expensive, or that schools prefer younger teachers. And so to me, sometimes I do feel like it's possible for teachers for various protected characteristics to have a target on their back in schools. And sometimes it's obviously, like, assuming this teacher did say that, and this has gone to a tribunal, and there's a judge with experience in employment law who said this is has dismissed it, and I will never take away from that. But I do sometimes feel like, would it be the case that another teacher might have gotten away with it? Like, I don't know. I agree totally with Carl. There's more to the story that we don't know about, and so I'm just kind of speculating.
So getting away from any of the media if we cut out sort of the media perspective on it, and X and all the sort of horrible things that have gone along with it, if we just look at the this is not cut, this is not edited, I'm looking at the actual judgment here. This idea, and I think it comes back to what you were saying, Yasmin. He's like, the accompanying hand gesture, particularly where at least some of the children did not have English as a first language. A teacher may get away with this comment, or a comment, sorry, I've got to be clear, in these circumstances, if all children receive it as a light-hearted comment and laugh along. It is common ground that this is not what happened here. So I find that really interesting. I think it comes back to what you were saying, Yasmin. It's almost like the judge is saying, if you feel that your class understands it's a joke, and they're all going to laugh along, and they all treat it as a joke. But the fact is, because of the context of the class, they didn't, and therefore it is absolutely legitimate what the school did. Now, I find that...
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, an interesting judgment. That's not... I'm reading off the actual judgment here. That's not a media cut-up or anything. I think it's such an interesting comment. Yeah.
I think it's silly, and I also think then, to me, it speaks to what did the senior leadership team do? Because if you did have a child that was really worried that they were going to get hit by their teacher, and this is their teacher, I believe, in year 6, who...
Yes, it was SATs. They were talking about what happened if you didn't do well on the SATs.
Yeah, and if they've been there for 30, I mean, they've probably not been, they might not, I don't know what schools they were at, but like, if this is someone who's been teaching for 35 years, and they're still, they haven't been barred from teaching, and they've probably never had a significant safeguarding breach. So like, I feel like, would it really have been that difficult for the leadership team to have spoken to this child or to this parent who might have particularly, complained, to just reassure them, actually, this is what the teacher meant. It was just meant as a joke. SATs are a really stressful time. We've got XYZ coming up after SATs. Like, would it have been really that difficult to do? I think that's why, for me, it speaks to, did this particular teacher have a target on their back, or were the school looking for a reason to get them out?
That's much more. You've really hit upon something, Yasmin. If I might just pitch in there, because invariably with things like this, on this offence in quotes alone, if this was what was said, I mean, who knows? But on that basis alone, the normal response, or the response that would be given by leadership teams in 99.9% of cases, is that they would speak to the member of staff concerned. There would be perhaps a verbal warning if that was, appropriate, and then there would be a sort of clearing of the air, and everyone would move on. To go to gross misconduct and dismissal is usually a course of action only taken when somebody has done something that is really quite serious and makes them an unsuitable person to be working with young people. Now, Yasmin says, if you've been teaching for 35 years and presumably during that time been deemed to be a suitable person, and then on the basis of one comment, which was intended, whether or not appropriately, but intended as some kind of a humorous comment, would be enormously over the top. And therefore, I strongly suspect that there are other things here. When the judge said that it is common ground, or used the phrase common ground, he or she used the phrase common ground. Well, that means that there is more information out there which is agreeing on what actually was going on in this context. But of course, we're not told any of those things.
No.
So we don't really know how they are. So I suspect this is a story is framed to make it look like teachers are being dismissed for making comments of this sort, when in actual fact the reality is quite different to that.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, on surface level, I've got to say, when I first read this article, like probably a lot of people out there, I was absolutely, terrified. You think, oh my God, some of the things, I don't think I've ever said I'd whack my students if they failed their A levels, but you make sort of jokes or whatever, and then you think, oh God, are we being policed on every single thing? Yeah. So on the surface, the idea that a teacher, someone says, what happens in the stats? And you say, oh, I'll hit you with this bit of paper, and everybody has a laugh, and then you're dismissed after 35 years of teaching, is horrified. Like, if that was true, and I'm caveated with if, it is troubling. It's like this idea, but you're right. Like what the judge says in that statement, you're totally right, Carl, is this idea like the students didn't receive it as a joke. That is common ground. So there's something else going on there, that it wasn't received. I'm just a little unsure of this idea. Again, we don't have the full context. I think there's so much going on. I should point out the teacher had been at that school for 4 years in a 35-year career. So she wasn't like a veteran of that school. The point I was thinking about is that bit about the second language. I think that you're right, Yasmin, like the press have had a field day with that. And I think it's very dangerous. But yeah, well, I guess it's your context. What the judge is saying is, you have to think of the context of the students you're teaching. You got to think about who's in front of you when you make certain jokes. And I think for me, when I actually think about that, I'm like, yeah, that seems common sense in a way. Like, of course, you need to think about the students in front of you, their understanding, their context before you make jokes. That does it on a sort of second reading of it. I don't think it's that controversial.
Yeah, I think though the classroom teacher would be the best judge of what her pupils could understand at all times, to be honest. And so I just also found it quite odd to say, like, it's almost, the judge was almost like also excusing the behavior and saying, well, actually, if they'd all understood, then maybe we wouldn't be here. But because not everybody has, then, the gross misconduct is correct, like it's upheld or whatever. I just found that odd. I honestly found that really odd. And I agree with both of you. Like, I feel like there's something missing, that there is something missing from this story. It just doesn't make sense to me as a standalone. But also, did you guys last year see that the TRA on the glue gun incident?
Yes, I'd have to be reminded. I did see it.
Yeah, remind me of it, Yasmin.
Of course. I remember when you said glue gun, I was like, there's something there. Yeah.
I thought of that. I don't know why I thought of, even though
but it's another one of those stories.
Yeah, so it was, I mean, I haven't read it since, but from what I remember, it was a teacher in a primary school in North London.
Yes.
And there was a child, like all the kids had been shown how to use a glue gun. And then was it that a child had joined later on or something? But ultimately, they ended up with a burn. And she was also the DSL, I believe, and then had to send them, instructed them where to go after school, and then had to go deal with a safeguarding issue. But then, long story short, ended up at a TRA hearing.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
after a parent took it to the media. I remember that.
I mean, I think
that kind of thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my comment would be, just thinking about that one, Yasmin, is the fact that these stories are so startling in their, like, when they come out, does sort of point to the fact that they don't happen very much. Like the press are like, this is what's happening. It's like, no, if it was really happening that much, it wouldn't actually be worth making a dramatic story about it. Like, the reason I can remember the glue gun one is because the press ran with it like this one for ages. But it does sort of point out that, like, actually most teachers are doing things every day, and it's all going fine. Otherwise, this wouldn't be worth, like, all the press, like, making a big deal out of. I don't know if that's what you guys think, but I'm like,
it's a little bit like, I mean, that's absolutely true. It's a little bit like, though, I draw an analogy between the way that some press reported the Boris Johnson having cake story was. He's been hounded out of office because he had a bit of cake.
Yeah.
Clearly framing it in such a fashion. It's the straw man, isn't it? It's framing it in a fashion that makes it possible for people to say, that's ridiculous. That's a farcical decision. But actually, for a case to get, it's in front of a judge here as well, this particular case. I mean, what on earth? Incidents of this sort happen in every school every day of the year. And all that's happened here is that a whole load of other things have been brushed to one side, and this particular element has been made the story. Now, I don't know whether, in fact, in reality, there was a case for the woman to answer or not. I presume there must have been somewhere along the way, otherwise it wouldn't have got that far in the whole legal process. But I can't imagine that the whole case revolved around this single comment and nothing else.
I think to answer your question as well, David, like I feel like a lot of it is just the relatability of it. And like Carl's just touched on that now, but I think I think part of why these stories get so big and like sensationalized is because a lot of teachers can see themselves in these, everyday errors or wrongdoings of teachers. And also I think even if you're not a teacher, like everyone has school in common, right? So I think a lot of people think back to their own teachers as well. Like I remember a lot of things, like I actually, I'm still friends with some of the people I went to school with, and sometimes some of us are now teachers, and we talk about how, our teachers, some of them would probably get reported to the TRA or just wouldn't stand a chance today, or would be on capability for some of the things that they did and said. Like I had a teacher that my history teacher was my favorite teacher ever, never ever used slides. Like he was just the show, he'd just talk at you and shout at you, and we loved him. And so we just thought, well, actually if he was observed today, would he stand a chance? So I just think a lot of it is just the relatability of it. I think a lot of teachers can see themselves in what somebody else has essentially lost their career over, and that's why I think it stands out a lot.
I mean, to me, there's so many things going on, but it is a sad story. Like regardless of everything, this is someone who's been a teacher for 35 years and now their careers come to an end by a misjudgment, whether it's been exaggerated in the press or what happened. I think we're sort of in agreement that there's things going on that are not being reported. We don't know the whole story, but at the end of the day, I think that relatability, what you're saying is, when you think about, you're like, my career, I could do so much and it could end. I mean, when you look at that story and you take an emotional point of view, you're like, my career could end because I say something silly in a class, whether that's true or not, but that's how you read it, that could take away 35 years of, hard work. So I think when it comes to teachers, you read about it, like I see it another perspective away from all the stuff. I'm like, it's a very sad story.
Yeah, it is. And there's no way that if somebody made a comment and that was the only thing they'd done, and there was nothing else that was brought into account, there's no way that a reasonable response to that would be to dismiss somebody on those grounds alone. I mean, if somebody, for instance, and I hesitate to say this because I don't want to suggest that this case in any way had any of this, but if somebody had previous examples of threatening behavior, and this was part of a long list of those, then that might be a different context. But we're not told that that's the case. I assume it's not, therefore, and therefore I think we're all highly skeptical of it. And but that's the way the media reports school stories sometimes. I think I need to just remind people of our sponsors, if I may.
Yes.
That this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt, educational publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Okay, sorry, Dave. Over to you.
No, that's all right. That just gave me time to bring up our next story, which is what I'm looking at now. So our next point of discussion today comes from this week. I saw it just this morning, thought it was pretty interesting, which the big headline I'm looking at is "Don't withdraw break time." I make because the letters are very big in the article. To punish poor behavior, schools told. Something called the Raising the Nation Play Commission. Have you guys heard of this before? Do we know there was a commission into Raising the Nation Play?
Not before the article.
Sorry, no, it wasn't essential. It wasn't top of my reading list, but I did look it up, and it comes from also a report from the what are they called? Sorry, it's the New Britain Project.
Okay.
I think are involved in it as well. But anyway, oh no, sorry, do beg your pardon. That's from a different story. So my apologies to the New Britain.
That's
Project.
all right. This is the
but anyway, the state of play. Yeah. No, I hadn't read it before. Yeah.
So they believe. So this is their. I mean, again, this is just recommendations to the Department of Education. No reason the Department of Education should listen to them. But they say the Department of Education should discourage punitive withdrawal, again, in inverted commas, of school break times as a way of punishing poor behaviour. It also recommends that the DfE should ring fence time for play throughout the school day, and that Ofsted should assess schools on provision of break time, which is also often referred to as playtime. And the commission explored how schools can improve children's access to play. And it basically said that there's been a deprioritization of play. A narrow emphasis on rote learning examinations have led too many schools to view break time as nothing more than a loss of valuable teaching time. Indirectly, the curriculum's narrow focus sends an implicit signal to schools that play is to be deprioritized. Oh, there we go. It's led by someone called Professor Becky Francis, who I'm not aware of. And she is, I am aware of Professor Becky Francis, is leading a curriculum assessment review. We know this. And this is another recommendation to Professor Becky Francis. So, I mean, I teach at a sixth form college, so I can't really comment on this idea of play. But my personal feeling, again, just looking at the headlines, is that this is just a bit too much. Like the idea of adding more assessment to Ofsted, that now you'll have Ofsted looking at how you would assess the quality of play on the provision of break time. I'm not even sure how that would work. I'd have to read the whole report. So yeah, I don't have a huge amount to comment in terms of play time itself, but there was a few things I found problematic with that. I'm not sure what you guys think.
Yasmin, do you want to kick off?
I think the part, I mean, when I initially saw this article or saw this in the news, it was more about children needing their playtime and not taking their break time away for punitive measures. That part I actually somewhat agree with. I think it really depends on the school that you're at. For me, like I once worked in a pupil referral unit where there were no after school detention. So if you were late to school, the only time that could really get taken away was your break time, and that worked quite well. But generally speaking, I would try to avoid break time detentions, only because I feel like children I need that time as an adult. Do you know what I mean? And like, I just feel like break time is good for your mind. It's important. It gives you an opportunity to get a snack if you need one, or to have a snack if you've got one with you, to get water. I think sometimes you could really set up the teacher after break time, who might suddenly have an increase in toilet requests, food requests, just generally grumpier children, so I just generally try to avoid break time just on, human grounds. Like, I just always think everyone needs a break, and so for me, that part of the article kind of resonated. With Ofsted, I'm not the biggest fan of Ofsted, I'll be honest. And I don't know, I just feel like it's just another thing, that they're kind of overseeing. And I just feel like break time looks very different everywhere. And also, unless you're going to have a blanket policy for whether or not you can or can't have detentions at break time, then what exactly are you assessing?
Yeah, I mean, on the thing of Ofsted, I guess I'm somewhat ambiguous. I'm not saying I'm like the most negative person about it, but I don't think you'd ever find any teachers who say they were fans. I don't think I've discovered that one yet. Carl, what are your thoughts?
Oh, there's so much here, honestly.
That's my thought as well.
I was like, sat back.
No, it's fine. First of all, the school having a child in for a breakdown detention is sometimes because they can't do one after school.
Yeah.
So in quite a few communities where, particularly where children might live quite a long way away from the school, the parents might not have a car in some cases, or their work might make it difficult for them to come and pick their child up for an after-school detention. So the only detention or similar experience that then is open to the school is to do it during the day by missing social time. So first of all, if you prohibited that, it's difficult to know what reasonable sanction you would be able to employ if you were a school where there were parents who were in that situation. Another thing is, I would be interested to know what they thought the most suitable alternative sanction would be. Let's, for example, say a child has bullied another child, or a child has hit another child, and in the course of that, that child is very difficult to manage during free and independent time. This is a common scenario in secondary schools. I'm sure primary schools also face it to a degree. And in that particular case, to keep other children safe, it is necessary to remove that particular child from an area where they're putting everybody else at risk. So given that the State of Play report suggests that schools should not take away a break time or a lunch time as a detention of some sort, then I'd be interested to know what other sanction they think the school should take. Because, you can be careful, must be careful what you wish for, because if a school can't do that, then it's forced to take more serious action, which may not be, necessarily appropriate. So, for example, if you can't do that, you might have to suspend a child from school for a length of time, or you might have to hold them in some kind of isolation unit for the entire day. So, it's usually a first response to something which has happened, and it might be more serious or less serious, but it's a way of saying, look, the thing that you most value is the thing we're taking away from you, because we want you to recognize that what you did was wrong.
Yeah.
And therefore, as a result of understanding that, you won't do that again, and therefore you'll have the right to that time. It's equivalent at home of a parent saying to a child, you're grounded, or you're going to your bedroom. That is equivalent to that. So if the State of Play are saying that schools shouldn't deny children their lunchtime or their break time for a session, then to be consistent, they should also ban parents from grounding their children or sending their children to the bedroom.
Yeah, or with scoring things they don't like.
Absolutely.
That's
I suspect that would be a little bit controversial.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I teach at a sixth form college. This isn't anything I'm I can only speak as a parent. My daughter's school, they have after school detentions. And then if that's not working, they do have isolation. I don't want to get into a debate about isolation booths and whether we think they're right or wrong. That's for another day. But when they're in isolation, they do their break time. They still have a break time. Of course they do, but at different times, because then they don't get to play football with their friends or see their friends and chat. And that's the punishment. And the reason it sort of works is because the students hate it. They want to be out there. So yeah, it's an odd thing to me. It's like, I hear what you're saying, Carl. My equivalent was like the idea of speeding. Like I'm going 100 miles down a 60 zone and I get a speeding ticket. And I'm like, but I really don't want to pay it now. I don't feel like it because, that's something I wanted to do. And it's like, okay, don't worry about it then. It's like the reason schools do it is because students want to have that time. So that as a threat, like the punishment has to be something you don't enjoy. Like, I think, and also about the computer games, like the reason your parents might withdraw your mobile phone or your computer, I'm speaking as a parent here, is because the kid doesn't like it. That's the whole point. So I'm a little bit confused exactly. If you start saying, well, this is so important, everything's important for students. So if you're saying, like, you could say, well, you can't have after school detentions because that's missing out on quality family time. Okay, well then we can get to do a debate whether you should have detentions at all. That's and I'm speaking as a parent here. I think I read the headline and just thought, well, that's ridiculous. But that's just how I feel about it. I'm not sure about yourself, Yasmin.
I don't have a problem with detentions per se, or not all detentions, but I think for me, it shouldn't be an either or. Like, it shouldn't be a break time or a detention, even though I completely get what you're saying, Carl, about, some parents can't do after school detentions and things like that. Like, I was saying earlier, I worked at a Peru and I completely get that. Sometimes it even impacts the safety of pupils. However, for me, it shouldn't be break time then. It's not that the detention shouldn't exist at all. Like, I think schools should have that option, but then why not lunchtime? Lunchtime is typically longer. Why can't a child have the detention they'd have at break time during their lunchtime, at the start of their lunchtime or for part of their lunchtime? I just think that it shouldn't be either or. Like, if you're a child, you're in a formative stage of your life, you're growing, you're developing, you need break time, you need food, you need energy, etc., you need water, so I think for me, the detention shouldn't completely remove someone's recreational time. That's just how I view it. So and I think if there's anything that I don't know, actually, I don't want to suggest anything really to Ofsted, but like I think one thing that I would be interested in, though, I don't think schools should be policed on, what kind of detentions they do or when. Like, I think every school has a different context and they would know best. Like, I do really believe and trust in schools. But I think what I would be interested in is the amount of repeat offences over time and maybe what kind of preventative measures were put in place for children, or are you just having the same child losing their break time for a significant proportion of an academic year? Or that's what I'd be interested in, really.
If we move away from the detention part, because it's not the whole thing, there's two other issues with it. One is the idea, so when Ofsted come in, they're not looking at the detention stuff. What they're sort of so they're recommending several things. The next recommendation that Ofsted would be judging a school on the quality of their provision of playtime. I'm not sure how you do that.
How would they do that?
The second one is it an issue? Lucy, I don't know. They're saying it's more and more of an issue. I'm guessing they mean as you get up to GCSE that schools are setting, say, revision time when it should be break time. That seems to be what's coming out of it. It's like it says that break time is being eaten up by not by the detentions, but by too much of a focus on exams and narrow focus on like curriculum. So I'm guessing what they're sort of saying there, reading between the lines, is that that playtime should be ring fenced and you can't use it, they're saying, for anything else. Curriculum's narrow. Sorry, just to read the quote. Curriculum's narrow focus sends an implicit signal to schools that play is to be deprioritized. So is that an issue that's happening?
I think, ironically, that would benefit teachers the most. Like, sometimes I actually hide at break time because I will just not get the 20 minutes to myself. Like, I just want to eat this chocolate, in peace and quiet. And like, someone's asking me to print exam questions. Someone else wants to tell me about, someone they're not friends with anymore. Like, there's always something going on at break. So I feel like that actually benefits teachers more than even students. But also, if a child like wants to revise, I see that as a really good thing. Not every child actually wants to be in the playground. Some children do generally feel more comfortable indoors or around adults, or in a safe space with their friends, and I completely support that. Like, I think that a child, the whole point for me of break time is being allowed to choose to spend your break, so long as it's, within the school rules, to spend your break time doing what makes you happy or what makes you feel like you've had a good break, And so I just don't, I'm just very skeptical of how that would be assessed, really.
Yeah, I guess. Sorry, Carl. Yeah. I was just asking, is it really an issue? Like, is there something, are they tackling something that's not even an issue that much?
Yeah, I mean, number one, Ofsted do actually already make judgments on behaviour and attitudes and how safe children are, young people are in schools by circulating around schools during social time. So that's common practice. Somewhat controversial in schools, because what schools would argue is that it's a bit random as to who you speak to and the moment that you choose, and just taking one snapshot of one lunchtime the atmosphere in the school might be very different in the middle of June to the middle of December, and all those things notwithstanding. But leaving all those questions just to one side for now, they do make a judgment. But the idea that Ofsted would penalise a school or mark a school down for not managing its its break times, its social times, begs a couple of questions. One, this is another stick to beat schools over the head with, and goodness knows we've got enough of those already. But two, the reason why schools, and as a school leader I can say this, the reason why schools, particularly in recent years, have reduced the amount of break time a little bit. So it's quite common now for schools to have about 40 to 45 minutes. But the reason is that all schools have noticed quite a significant change, particularly since the pandemic, in young people's ability to be able to play independently with one another without it disrupting into a violent or a threatening atmosphere. And you have to bear that in mind. A lot of schools found that they used to have traditional hour-long breaks, and young people were getting into increasingly dangerous behaviour on a large scale. Now, you may say, well, it's up to the school to police that, to supervise that. Well, one of the problems with that is that schools are not funded to actually appoint, even if they can find them, even if they recruit them, they are not funded for appointing staff to supervise at break or lunch. So most schools rely, I know certainly I do completely, most schools rely on staff, not just teaching staff, but support staff who are effectively working through their break and lunch to supervise those times. And you need a lot of people. If you're at a secondary school of 1,000 or 1,000 plus, particularly in older sites where they aren't sort of designed and configured in ways that make it easy to supervise them, you need a lot of people to do that. So that's a lot of people who are having to give up a lot of time. Now, teachers are busy enough people as it is. And as Yasmin said, it's valuable time for them to be able to regroup. A lot of teachers these days spend time in their classroom at break and lunch rather than anywhere else, because they're actually setting up their next classes. And common experience in schools, sadly, is that the staff room has become something of a desert because people don't find the time to go to it, and have become almost sort of, and they're expected to have a lot of schools are expected to have children in their classes. So particularly when the weather's poor, the children go into the classrooms, and so the teacher's got to be there anyway. So teachers are on duty a lot of the time to extend play times, whatever the phrase might be, break times, social times, would require schools to have even more staff having to supervise those. And I think that would be expensive, problematic, and in some cases detrimental to the well-being of staff.
Yeah. So just to finish up, I totally agree with what you're saying, Carl. That all makes sense. I mean, my sort of final thought is, I see it as a danger, just another thing, children aren't getting the playtime they need outside, like another thing that like schools are having to manage that goes beyond now it's like, so many things that schools are being expected to do, that almost taking on the role of parents, and what we traditionally would have thought, was like a parent's role to take your child. Oh, well, children don't always get that. Well, here's another thing that we will legislate. I honestly don't think it's going to happen. Look, this is blue sky thinking, but my final concern is, here's another thing that some, commission wants teachers to do that we really should be. No, that's the responsibility of society at large, and parents, and because they're not doing it, here's something else for teachers. So that's my final thought, my final concern. Yasmin, to wrap up.
My final thought is I quite like commissions. I feel like I learn a lot from them. I know there is often the argument, but you're not teachers or you're not a serving teacher. But I do feel like I've learned a lot from different commissions. And yeah, my final thoughts is I'd like to hear more about the rationale behind why Ofsted want to do this.
Cool. Awesome. Well, it's been great talking to you guys this morning, as usual. I hope our viewers found it riveting, interesting, and lots to think about. Have an awesome Sunday, everybody.
Time to take a break.
Standing a world-class vision, a world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused